All right, what's up? The U.S. Belgium game finished a few hours ago. Just took some time to just kind of collect my thoughts a little bit. Sorry for my voice. I'm a bit sick, so if the audio and like how I'm sounding sounds weird, I apologize. Yeah, man. The U.S. crashed out of the World Cup. Hold on, make sure I'm on the right screen here. Yeah, to say the least, extremely disappointing for me in terms of my memory. Watching the U.S. is probably the most, or at least one of the most embarrassing performances I've seen from the U.S. men's national team. And given the build-up in the game with the Balogun red card and that being overturned, and the fact is, the U.S. is hosting, and all the expectations and narratives and storylines going into this game potentially being watched, I believe, by 50, 60 million Americans, many of whom don't even watch soccer, don't even watch the U.S. men's national team during qualifying, even during Copa America. Like, this is their only exposure to watching the U.S. or even just soccer in general. And to give it just, put on display like that, it's extremely embarrassing. And not even just for just being an American watching, the average American watching, thinking like, oh, we're hosting the World Cup, like, could we do something? And, proving it yet again that, soccer really is just a sport that we pushed aside here, that, reinforcing narratives that, the U.S. will never be good at soccer and, we're not ready, which, I fully disagree with, given the fact from what I've seen from this team throughout the tournament against Paraguay, against Australia, and against Bosnia. And, I'll get into that a little bit more. And look, just to preface all this, sorry, I should have made love of this, is, I was planning on doing around a 32 video, got caught up with, July 4th weekend, everything like that. And then I was like, all right, I'm just going to wait for round 16 to happen. And, after watching this game, I'm like, okay, I can just do a whole video on this game because, being American, I have so many thoughts just given the expectations of this team coming into the tournament, how this game went out, the build up with the red card, everything like that. Like I said, the expectation of this game individually and, what the future looks like for U.S. soccer. So, again, Balogun, talk about Balogun, the red card against Bosnia. And look, I think the majority of people would agree that it's not a red card. However, the fact was he did get a red card. I don't believe there's been any, in the history of the World Cup, there's been a nation or a team that's been able to overturn a red card decision. So this was the first we've ever seen it before. And I think it was, look, the red card's unjust. It shouldn't have been given. And there's a whole analysis, I believe, by FIFA's own rules, by how they're allowed to use VAR to issue red cards. I believe they violated it. There's a clip on that. Maybe I'll leave that in the description or something like that. But regardless of the fact, Belgium was upset about it, and I think whether Balogun was here or not, impacted both teams' preparation. Obviously, it seemed like it impacted the U.S.'s preparation a little bit more, given the fact that how they played in Belgium really rose to the occasion. But I also think, from a mentality point of view, I also think it did impact this game in the sense of like the U.S. And I think the whole narrative with this team is, I'll get more into the mentality of this team a little bit, farther down the line in this video. But in the sense of the U.S. being hard done and just being like it's us against the world and really digging deep, saying we're gonna fight and we're gonna leave everything on the pitch because Balogun, one of us, one of the guys in the group in the team, he should be here with us and we're gonna fight for him. But instead, you kind of get this scenario where the red card's overturned. All of a sudden, the U.S. has been having a good World Cup. You topped your group. You're hosting the World Cup. All of a sudden, you suddenly feels like you're on this fairy tale run and you can do no wrong and everything's just falling into place. And then Belgium comes along and it's like, oh, we're going to go through Belgium just because, we're playing so well. We're hosting the World Cup and everything is just written in the stars for the U.S. men's national team. And then, bam, you just get hit with the craziest reality check against Belgium because, the U.S. men's national team, they did not turn up then. From minute 1 to minute 90, Belgium were by far and away the better team. By far and away. It wasn't even a competition. The U.S. lost the game as soon as they stepped on the pitch. There's no moment in time you can say today the U.S. was a better team than Belgium, or they looked anywhere close to Belgium. A Belgian team who, in my opinion, sure, going into this tournament, I picked them as dark horses. The way they've been playing, I'm surprised they're even in the quarterfinal because this Belgian team is not that great. Let's be honest, it's a Belgian team, even without what you would say their star players and the likes, De Bruyne is washed, but you say De Bruyne, Doku, Lukaku. A Belgian team who, again, struggled against Egypt, struggled against Iran. The only decent performance I think they gave was up against New Zealand. And against Senegal, sure, they did well to come back down from 2 goals, but I also think that was a lot on part of Senegal just capitulating at the final moment. So, again, just the way the U.S. displayed themselves today. Every player, I think Tillman's the only player today who can walk away with a bit of shame today. Every other player disgraced themselves. Matt Freese, again, going into this tournament, we knew the U.S., the weakest position on the team was a goalkeeper, and today it caught up with the U.S. And it showed, with the third goal. I'd argue even the second goal, I think Matt Freese should have done better to really claim the ball. And maybe even the first goal, some would say. But regardless, definitely the third goal where he just made absolute out of it, just for some reason takes a touch, stutters on the ball, gets mixed up, and then we go into Tim Ream, who, look, was absolutely just ran ragged today, ragdolled, like the Catalari just had his way with him. And again, it's just, for me, the U.S. just, rock into a World Cup with Tim Ream 4 years later on from Qatar, I think really just shows like the lack of center back depth, the lack of squad depth within the U.S. It's no secret that going beyond the first team the U.S. put out here, when it comes to the quality in the squad, it drops off drastically. And, as poor as Tim Ream was today, the fact that Tim Ream is starting for the U.S., I think speaks more about the lack of quality within the U.S. Talent pool than Tim Ream himself. But then the biggest surprise, I think, is Chris Richards, a player, he's played in the Premier League for numerous seasons now. We just won the Conference League with Palace, the FA Cup, the Community Shield with Palace. Is a guy who's played at some of the highest levels within club football. And again, today, just absolutely just didn't rise to the occasion. The first goal, not just him, but the whole U.S. back line. Loose ball up in the air, Trossard controls it in the box, and everyone all of a sudden does the mannequin challenge. And it's just, for some reason, it should never be that easy. It should never be that easy. Just, lose contested ball up in the air, and everyone freezes. And I feel like that for the second goal, and even the fourth goal for him, just caught on the ball, just pushed it aside by Lukaku, who, look, he's been effective on the bench this tournament, but let's be honest, this has been Lukaku who's had a rough year, rough couple of years now. So embarrassing for him. The fullbacks today, just not great. Tyler Adams and McKinney absolutely, they shot themselves in the midfield. Not even just them. I thought, from Robinson, Freeman, Dest, Adams, McKinney, all these guys, every single player, for some reason, no one could take a first touch. Everyone was chasing their own first touch. Never looked settled on the ball. McKinney and Adams, I don't know how many combined passes, complete passes they made, because I can probably count on my hand the amount of complete passes they made today in the midfield. Robinson and Dest, again, just too many poor decisions on the ball, especially Dest in the first half. Just, I think for Dest, there's no denying he's a good dribbler, but his decision-making is awful at times. His path, whether it's in the path or the dribble. And then at Dest, we know you can get him defensively. Pochettino did well to recognize the issue and take him off, but all of the momentum the U.S. was starting to build within the second half, if you even want to call it momentum, was killed off by that third goal. And again, today, you're looking at Pulisic, and like I said, many Americans tune into this game not knowing much about soccer, but when you ask the casual American, I got a couple of friends, they're not really into soccer, but they know who Pulisic is. In their mind, Pulisic, he's the face of this team, he's the best player in this team, and the performance he put out today, to give the ball away 11 times in the first half, to just look uninspiring. I know he's playing with injury, but for me, Pulisic's been compared to the likes of Landon and Clint Dempsey, and for Pulisic today to give that type of performance against this Belgian team, and especially I'm not going to delegitimize the injury, but to kind of play off I'm injured. You think Clint Dempsey would have done that? Clint Dempsey is playing 90 minutes on one leg if he has to. Because I've seen it before. That's the grit. That's the type of personality and character you're looking to see. Because the U.S. played scared today, and they show no grit. They show no character in today's game. Balogun today, obviously, the whole notion is about his inclusion in the team, given the FIFA overturning his suspension. Balogun today just not at it. If I'm being honest, like made a couple of decent runs, but then his link of play wasn't great, and then he had that one chance again. I believe around like the 8th minute where he was in against Courtois. Not really the greatest finish, but yeah, just not at it today. And yeah, I mean, look, with Pochettino, look, my thing with Pochettino, I had a lot of question marks about Pochettino in terms of preparation building up into this tournament. There's like question marks of where Pochettino, he's going to Argentina when he should be pairing with the U.S. and they beat the Uruguay 5-1. So I think it's been kind of a roller coaster in terms of, what you're gonna get out of this U.S. men's national team. And for me, going into this tournament, someone who does pay attention to the U.S., throughout qualifiers, throughout, how the U.S. is performing at Copa America and stuff like that. I was, I'm always going to support the U.S. because I'm American, but I'm like, how much am I going to really get behind this team? And for me, what I saw from Paraguay, the Paraguay game, I was really inspired by that performance. I was like, okay, I'm really going to get behind this team for this World Cup. I liked what I saw against Paraguay. I liked what I saw against Australia, right? And for me, Turkey was a dead rubber game. So, yeah, but the thing in this game, I guess, and I'll go back into Poch, and I'll throw Bosnia into this, is that U.S. have played teams, they've only played inferior opposition in the sense, well, Paraguay's a good team. They knocked out Germany, knocked out France. But what I'll say with Paraguay is they really pose no attacking threat. There's a lot of talk about Enciso, but at the end of the day, Enciso's only one player, and he's a player who was playing at Ipswich 2 seasons ago, had an okay season at Strasbourg. Like, he's not some type of world beater. And so the U.S. has only played against teams that really pose no attacking threat to them. Australia, probably one of the worst offensive teams in the World Cup. They're strong. Sure, they're a decent defensive side, but really pose no attacking threat. And Bosnia, they can't play the ball on the ground. Let's be honest, and they're relying on 4-year-old and Dzeko up top still. So, the U.S. comes against first decent side, which was my biggest question about the U.S. this tournament. In my prediction video, where I talked about the U.S., I'm like, I'm not sure of this U.S. team because for me, they have not proved it so far in any of the friendlies they've played over the last couple of years, and even going back to Copa America, is I don't think they can play, and even the last World Cup, I don't think the U.S. can raise their level to decent opposition, to beat decent opposition. Any level of opposition that's on their playing field or slightly above. Like, can the U.S. capitalize on the fact, they're playing at home? They're playing at home. They're playing against a Belgian team. But if you go on paper, if you try to do a combined 11 between these two teams, like ignoring the performance today and just, where are these players at in terms of their stock in the game, I would say Courtois and maybe Onana and Tielemans and Onana, I think those were the only 3 Belgian players on paper that get into this U.S. team, right? And so you look at, okay, the U.S. is quote unquote better than this Belgium, or at least on a level playing field as Belgium. And still yet today, you saw him shrink. You saw him shrink onto the occasion. So for me, my biggest doubts, my biggest questions for the U.S., my biggest concerns for the U.S. were realized. And for Pochettino, I like what I saw. I think today was more on the players in terms of the individual performances of each player on the field really let themselves down. I thought, and I think there'll be a question whether Pochettino stays on, whether it be because, it's another really 4-year cycle unless the U.S. is going to play and win another Copa America. And in terms of my own expectations, in terms of where the U.S., like I already said, for me, an overwhelming success for the U.S. this tournament would be a quarterfinal run. If the U.S. were to get knocked down in round of 16, it would have to come down to context. Similar to, I would say, how Canada got knocked out to Morocco. Yes, they lost 3-0. Morocco got 2 late goals on, but there's no expectation for Canada to beat Morocco. How Mexico lost the Azteca, sure, is disappointing. They couldn't capitalize on the fact they were a man up against England, but at the end of the day, England are one of the main contenders for this tournament. This Belgian team, as much as I did rate them going into this tournament, they're no real contenders for this. They're no real contenders for the World Cup. And yet again, if you go man for man with the U.S. and Belgium, it is very close, extremely close. So, the one thing I say with Pochettino is maybe he didn't prepare the team well. Sure, maybe that comes down to the fact that he prepared the team without expecting Balogun not to play. I don't think that really should be the decisive factor. I'm not trying to make an excuse for the U.S. losing today because ultimately players do not show up. I'm looking at Christian Pulisic, especially, who's the talisman of this team, and he failed to show up in the biggest game the U.S. has played in his U.S. men's national team career. And yet again, I think it just really stems down to the mentality of this team, and which is another concern I had going into this tournament in terms of some of the players on the team being overrated and kind of believing in their own hype. And I'm not denying these players aren't talented. Like, they are playing. Some of these guys do play for top clubs across Europe, rightfully so. But there still is a part of me where I think that some of these players think they're better than what they are. It comes from international breaks where, the likes, we've seen Pulisic, McKinney, Adams, Richards, these guys pulling out of international, don't want to be called up to the U.S. national team during the international break because they're focusing on their club season. They don't want to play they don't want to play friendlies against Panama, against Guatemala, against Honduras, all this type of stuff, right? You saw Pulisic last summer. He pulled out of the Gold Cup squad because he wanted to be fit for the next season. I don't think you'd ever see Landon Donovan or Chris Dempsey rejecting a call from the U.S. national team. Do you get what I'm saying? And then this whole tournament, the fact the U.S. is doing well, and we had the Balogun red card overturned, and everything felt like it was falling into place, and it was fate that the U.S. was just going to win today, and the U.S. was going to make something happen in this World Cup. I think the players believed, and I guess I would throw Pochettino in this as well to some extent, that the players believed their own hype. They came into this game with a level of arrogance and false belief that, they just have to walk on the field and everything will just work out itself. But Belgium gave them the sweetest reality check they had in their careers. U.S. come crashing out in one of the most embarrassing ways I've seen a host crash out of the World Cup since I saw Qatar last World Cup get grouped. But regardless, extremely disappointing. Well, not extremely disappointing campaign for U.S., but disappointing way to go out for the U.S. It's just like a lot of the momentum of this team, because I think a lot of people were starting to really notice, the growth of soccer in this country, especially this U.S. national team after the performances they gave in this tournament, and just the overall hype of the World Cup being here in the U.S. So, again, if you're an American, I don't really know. Like, for me, as someone who's going to watch, this team, someone who's into soccer and the football, again, nothing really changed. Like, my notion in terms of my own beliefs about this team, the sport in this country, don't really change. But I think for the casual viewer, for the upcoming generation growing up watching this team, I'm curious to know what they're thinking in terms of are they going to take soccer a little bit more seriously, or is the narrative that soccer is a nothing sport? I'm not going to say a nothing sport, but like a secondary sport in this country. Does that still exist? Is that just more reinforced by this performance because they're not watching this U.S. men's national team play in the qualifiers? They're not watching club football. They're not going to, I expect many of the American fans who turned into this game, they're not going to watch Argentina, Egypt, and Switzerland, Colombia tomorrow. Do you get what I'm saying? So, for me, the U.S. had an opportunity this World Cup to really capture the American public, really make them start taking soccer a little more seriously, really open their eyes to the U.S. can actually compete in soccer on a global stage in a sport that that's considered a foreign sport in America. So but ultimately the way the U.S. men's national team exits today, I think leaves a massive stain for the U.S. on this campaign, and it's something that's going to be hanging over the U.S. for a while. So I think sure. I think a lot will come out more about the team, more about the game, whatever, in the coming days. But for now, this is what I'm thinking. I think it's just extremely disappointing feeling to see the U.S. go out like this, especially after watching the way the U.S. really played this tournament. For me, I was like one of those people who was, again, like I said, skeptical of the U.S., but I was really captured by it. I believe this team could do something today, despite my pre-tournament doubts or concerns. So, I'm going to do a full round of 32 and 16. I'm just going to combine it together just because I didn't get around to do the 32 videos. So, that will be coming out in the coming days, hopefully. But for now, man, I'm going to end it here. And, I'll see y'all in the next one. Later.